Hey everyone, this is Dominic, and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today I'm excited to present another list video for you all with 10 great Daredevil comics for new readers. Fans of the channel might know that Daredevil is in fact my favorite superhero and comic book character of all time, so this video is long overdue and I can't wait to show you all what my picks are. But before we jump in, I just want to shout out our channel sponsor, OrganicPriceBooks.com. If you're looking to pick up your comic book collected editions, look no further. And if you see something you like, you can use my code at checkout, TheComicBookReport, to save $2 off of your order. Please note if you use my affiliate code or the affiliate link in the description to make a purchase, I will earn a small commission, but it's a fantastic way to support the channel. Thank you so much for considering. Now let's get started with these Daredevil comics. First on our list, we're going all the way back to 1964 with Daredevil issue 1. This comes from the Silver Age, courtesy of Stan Lee, and this is where we get the origin story for our favorite horned head hero. The book I have here in my hands is the Daredevil Omnibus Volume 1 from Marvel Comics. I'm not clear if this is in print or not, but I know they just released Volume 2. You can also find a handful of these early issues in Epic Collection format, Marvel Masterworks, and of course digital and the original single issues. I went ahead and put this on the list because I think going back to the origins, to the very first appearance of this character, is a fantastic place to start for new readers. Of course, the issues are very dated as it is from the Silver Age, but there's still a lot of charm with these issues. The artwork is Silver Age fantastic, and honestly, I always have fun revisiting. I always like seeing the early issues too, with the yellow costume before he gets his traditional red one that is his most prevalent throughout most of his arcs. I know there are a fair amount of you that are probably watching that have no interest in Silver Age comic books, and I think that's totally fine. I definitely have recommendations for you as well, but there's going to be completionists out there, or those that really can appreciate some of these older issues, and for all of you, I had to include it on the list for where to start Daredevil. Or if you're a new reader and you want to see these origins for the first time, you gotta go back to the beginning. Had to include it on the list here. I really do like this omnibus format. It is an oversized hardcover edition with nice glossy print pages. I also used to have the Epic Collection line, which was a standard size trade paperback that had some of these early issues. Both formats were really great, and I could comfortably recommend either of them to any prospective reader out there. Some might be surprised to learn that Daredevil didn't always have ninjas. We didn't always have characters like Elektra or the Kingpin haunting him throughout a lot of his comics. The early issues are a bit more humble, and we don't have some of the iconic additions to this character that we got later on in the history, especially by creators like Frank Miller. But that being said, it's still a very fun crime-fighting read. Next on our list is Daredevil, The Man Without Fear by Frank Miller. This is another one that's been reprinted so many different times in different paperbacks, hardcovers, but this is my collection here. It's an older trade paperback collection of The Man Without Fear. For those that don't know, this is another Daredevil origin retelling, this one again by the great Frank Miller. As I alluded to earlier, he is responsible for adding so many key elements to Daredevil's mythos. The modern Daredevil character construct we have sits squarely upon the foundation he provided, including elements like the Hand, all of the ninjas, Electro, making Kingpin one of his main villains, and adding Stick to his origin as this kind of trainer to his disciple. Really a great advancement for the character, and this is his take on the origin story. He gives it the kind of Batman Year One treatment, and it's a fantastic little mini-series, kind of graphic novel for those that want to check out the character. It is a more modern origin retelling, and I think it's going to be a better on-ramp for many compared to the Silver Age book I recommended before. It's really a fun read. It's a pretty zippy read as well. I think for people that want, again, that early look at who Daredevil is, how he got his start, and to get a real flavor for the kind of crime fighter he is and the person this character of Matt Murdock is, this is a great place to start. I absolutely love it. I think it's a great standalone graphic novel, a pretty fun, just zippy read, and something that adds, again, so much to this character. I think for those that are familiar with Frank Miller's run on the Daredevil book as well, if you haven't read this somehow, this is a must read absolutely. Definitely don't sleep on Daredevil, the Man Without Fear. And while I have you for a moment, if you're enjoying this video and you would like to see more like it, or comic reviews, or fun community posts, unboxings, haul videos, things like that, and you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, I invite you to do so. I'd love to have you as a watcher. Thank you for considering. Now on with the show. Next on our list, Daredevil Yellow by Jeph Loeb and Tim Sale. I had to include this on my list. I absolutely love this story. For those that are unfamiliar with Jeph Loeb and Tim Sale, they are the creative powerhouses behind works like Batman: The Long Halloween, Spider-Man Blue, and so many, many more. This is part of the Marvel Colors series of books, but you can absolutely read it as a standalone work here. It's basically a little graphic novel that kind of pays homage to that Silver Age of comic books I mentioned earlier. It essentially has the main character, Matt Murdock, Daredevil, kind of reflecting nostalgically on his sort of upbringing and origin and early years as the Daredevil hero, but particularly through the lens of kind of eulogizing and remembering his lost love, the late great Karen Page. This is a really moving work that, again, it shows kind of the more optimistic sides of his origin story that's blended in with a lot of the personal tragedy he would go on to suffer. But I really love the style. It has sort of a watercolory feel, and the character models are just that unique Tim Sale style. It's a really interesting stylistic choice called Daredevil Yellow because it refers back to that period where he has that early yellow costume. I think that this book is really just a triumph. There's other books in this series like Hulk Gray, Spider-Man Blue, and I think there's even a Captain America White. So if you enjoyed this book after reading it, there are others that kind of reflect on different characters. This one is one of my personal favorites, being such a huge fan of Daredevil as a character and some of his main supporting cast of characters. I think that this is really good for new readers as well because you really don't need to know a ton about the character to still appreciate this work. I love it as well because you also get to explore, again, some of his early central cast of supporting characters. We do brush into a lot of his history, and it gives you a good primer and feel for that kind of early Daredevil storytelling. And being a standalone graphic novel for all intents and purposes, it's a great way to just get in and get out if you want to sample this character without a big commitment. Perhaps my most controversial take, the Daredevil Battlin Jack Murdock by Zeb Wells. This book I feel like is not talked about enough. It's definitely a more interesting niche read that I think deserves more credit, and I think it's a fantastic on-ramp for new or prospective Daredevil readers out there who really want to get more of a grasp, again, on that kind of origin era storytelling and really a look behind the man who was so influential in creating who would eventually become Daredevil. Of course, talking about Matt Murdock's father, Battlin Jack Murdock. This book is part of the Marvel Knights era of books. This is a time when a lot of the Marvel titles were being kind of relaunched, revamped with a kind of more adult bend, a little bit edgier, more creative kind of storytelling in many ways. And this book, like I said, I think is a little bit slept on, but we really explore the character of Jack Murdock, Matt Murdock's father. He's this boxer that has a lot of different kind of complexities to him, his morality. He has his own sense of code, but he gets kind of strong-armed and kind of put into a position that is not really that great, not reputable, and he's trying to juggle between kind of the man he wants to be and the man he is, and the man he needs to be for his young son, Matt. Within these pages, we don't only explore the last days of Jack Murdock, we also explore the origins of Daredevil. There really is still that feeling of origin story in here. There's still so much Matt Murdock Daredevil in this book, so don't let the title fool you. If you're here for Daredevil, you're definitely going to see him in one fashion or another, but this is an exploration on fatherhood and sonship. It's an exploration at origin and what impacts and what founds kind of what your future will hold, and I just think it's a really great book. I think Zeb Wells has a great understanding of the characters, and I just don't hear this book talked about enough. I think it's a fantastic place to start for new readers, and I just wanted to recommend it to get more light shown on this incredible book. Next on our list, Daredevil by Frank Miller and Klaus Janson Omnibus. You can find these issues in various other forms as well. There were Ultimate Collection, single issues, digital, and more. But this is the Frank Miller run. This is the straightforward Daredevil run that he did that completely redefined the character, introduced a lot of those figures into his mythos I mentioned earlier, like Elektra, the Hand, Stick, really positioning the Kingpin as his big bad. I really just think that the work that Frank Miller did for Daredevil as a character cannot be understated. Yes, Stan Lee created him back in the Silver Age, but this is really where he was reborn. This is really where the character has the kind of modern touches. There's a grittiness that is introduced in this Frank Miller run that has had a lasting impact and legacy on the character and Marvel Comics as a whole. While this run itself is already quite dated, it really holds against the test of time and is really considered one of the best single comic book runs from the big two ever, and I get why people say that. I think it's absolutely phenomenal, and I think that there are so many worse places to start reading Daredevil than this one. This is such a great point to really see like the origins of the modern Daredevil is how I would say it. No, it's not a retelling of the origin story, but it is giving us new aspects of the origin story previously never shown. They are kind of like retcons, but I think it's just so wonderfully done. The illustrations throughout by predominantly Klaus Janson are also absolutely stunning. There is this kind of noir feeling to this book, and again, it's a kind of theme and like feel to this book tonally that we see echoing across subsequent runs by modern creators as well, and I just love it. I think that if you want a sense of the modern Daredevil and you want to trace that to the beginning, this is where you start. The Frank Miller run. Again, just some classic issues here. I love it. I love to revisit. I believe that this is still in print, so definitely try to get it before it's gone. It is a spectacular look at this character. Segueing now into more modern runs, of course, Daredevil, Guardian Devil by Kevin Smith and Joe Quesada. This is also from the Marvel Knights era, and this really relaunched the character of Daredevil. We have it starting with Daredevil #1 again. And this was really a fresh start for the Daredevil character. I think that Kevin Smith did a fantastic job of, you don't really need to know a lot about this character to just jump into a really interesting, complex kind of mystery that dabbles almost into the supernatural, it appears like. Really like the storytelling. I think the art from Quesada is really typical of the time, the kind of early 2000s look to the artwork, but it's some of my favorite from Quesada I've ever seen. This is definitely a more gritty Daredevil, and it deals with some really intense and mature subject matter. This was also just such a prolific time in the Daredevil comics history. Again, from here on out, we have had a really strong title for decades, I would say. There were, of course, great runs before this point, like Frank Miller. What I've read from Anna Senti is also a really great run, but this really is a starting point for a new era in Daredevil, and I just think it's really fantastic. I think for those that really only like modern comics, you can still start with this, even though it's about 20 years old, and still feel like you're reading a modern book. I think the consequences of this book are also really profound and interesting, and I think to this day, every time I revisit, there's something new I take out of this book that I just really enjoy. Like I said, there is a real interesting mystery, there's a lot of great crime fighting, and a lot of just Daredevil trying to figure out ethical questions and what he wants to stand for. Really great book. I think, again, Smith does such a fantastic job, and it really kicks off this new era of Daredevil extremely well. I definitely recommend it. For some reason, I feel like this is a book that's not really talked about these days either, but I think it should be. It's definitely a fascinating read that has had just really interesting repercussions, like I said, for a lot of these characters. Next on our list, Daredevil by Brian Michael Bendis and Alex Maleev. This book I have is the Ultimate Collection Volume 1. It's part of a 3-volume set I'm thankful enough to have. They also, I think, have 2 omnibus editions. There are smaller trade paperbacks you can find, along with the other, floppy copies, digital copies, things like that. This run for me is a great place to start for new readers because, well, frankly, there's just not a ton you need to know about Daredevil before reading this. And this is really the start of another great era in Daredevil comics. Bendis and Maleev, especially with his art style, incorporate a lot of grittiness and, again, noir aspects into the Daredevil mythos. This really feels like a crime or detective kind of series that just happens to have a veneer of superheroics attached to it, and I really think that that works in the favor of this Daredevil character. I think if you're a fan of things like the Daredevil Netflix show, you will definitely like the run by Bendis here. There's a lot of just criminal elements in New York and Daredevil trying to stop them kind of aspects to this. I think it really is lovingly in the vein of Frank Miller's stuff, but it feels more contemporary. It feels more authentic, real, organic in many ways. I don't know if it's because it's a much more modern book or it just takes itself so deadly seriously, but for whatever reason, this is just a fantastic read. I absolutely love it. This is actually my favorite run on superhero comics that I've had the pleasure of reading. It really sets itself apart, and it's one that has stood with me all of these years. I absolutely love this series, and again, I think that you could do so much worse than reading this book. I think if you do want more of a standard graphic novel feel where you can just read a quick 1 to 200 page book and leave, you might be better reading something like Daredevil the Man Without Fear. But if you want to settle in and read like a full creator team run on the book, maybe something like a couple, 30 issues or so, maybe a little more than that, I'm not even sure anymore. This is really a great run to start in. You can settle in on these characters, read a handful of fantastic story arcs. What a great read. Next up, we have one of the most polarizing modern Daredevil books. Of course, I'm talking about Daredevil by Mark Waid. This is the volume 1 here. You can again find omnibuses or a lot of those other formats I mentioned earlier. This collection only has the first handful of issues, maybe like 6 issues-ish, but I have the full run in these formats for the most part. I do absolutely love Mark Waid's run on Daredevil, and I think it's a great place to start for new readers because, like so many creative runs, he really establishes a new setup and status quo for the characters. We have the introduction of a few new supporting characters, a couple new villains throughout this run, and it really is memorable. The art style as well from the handful of artists attached to this book are really eye-popping and gorgeous. There is a classic feel to it, there's a vibrancy with the coloring, and the look of it can almost feel like a throwback to an earlier age of comics. I think why this is such a polarizing book is this is more of a happy-go-lucky, I say with air quotes, Matt Murdock and Daredevil character. This is more of the incarnation we've been seeing lately, like with his appearance on She-Hulk, if you're a fan of the Disney Plus series. But this is a much more lighter-toned Daredevil book. I think why it's so polarizing is because some people only like their Daredevil comics to be grimdark, gritty, crime noir, and I totally respect that. That is actually my preference for the Daredevil character as well. But that being said, there is moments of levity throughout his history, and I think that Mark Waid captures the essence of that kind of Daredevil while layering some more dark undercurrents underneath this happy-go-lucky kind of veneer, and I think it's just really expertly done. When I admit, even myself, when I first started reading this run, I was really alienated by the tonal shift in the characters and the storytelling, but sticking through it, I realized that this had such a gripping story to tell in its own right, and beneath the kind of grin and glitz and glamour, there was still the deadly serious, tragic Matt Murdock Daredevil character underneath it all. And seeing that kind of show up throughout the run was really a masterstroke for this creator. Love this Daredevil run. I absolutely recommend it for new readers. Next on the list today, Daredevil by Charles Soule. Now this is another Daredevil run that's a bit more modern. Charles Soule had a great run that is known for its stylistic design choices. I love it. We have Daredevil in his black suit throughout this entire run. This work also has him take on a young ward or protege in the character of Blind Spot, and I really like that character as well. This takes place after the Mark Waid run I just reviewed, and it's a return to a much more gritty, dark Daredevil character. So again, we have another really huge tonal shift, but I think that this is a great place to start for new readers as well, who are looking to jump into a modern run and who maybe don't want to try some of the other suggestions I've already made. This book, again, is stylistically really beautiful. You can get a kind of inkling of the art style in these first pages. This is really what it's like through the entire Charles Soule run. I have this whole run in trade paperback. They also released an omnibus that looked quite beautiful from reviews I saw online, but this is really a great run. I think that I worry that it's going to get lost in the shuffle of some other fantastic modern Daredevil runs, but it shouldn't be understated. This is really a great run in its own right. Really love that Daredevil got a sidekick that has a lot of agency and just uniqueness to him in the character of Blind Spot I mentioned earlier. It was also a really fun choice to put him back in a black costume. It's a really good look for Daredevil, and it added some striking visuals throughout this run. Something I enjoyed as a longer-term Daredevil reader is there's a great deal of mystery on how this run shows up directly after Mark Waid's, given how that ended and how this picks up. And part of the central mystery is what this run kind of unpacks the further you go. But for a new reader, you don't really miss out on a ton. They fill you in on what you need to know, which is why I think this is going to be so accessible for new readers as well. But for longer-term fans as well, there's a ton to love, and I love seeing them explain what happened. And we also get some fascinating moments in the history of the Foggy Nelson-Matt Murdock friendship. For all of these reasons and more, the Charles Soule run is definitely a worthwhile chapter within Daredevil's history, and a fun recommendation for someone who wants to check out the character. And last but not least, Daredevil by Chip Zdarsky. This is the ongoing Daredevil run, though it is getting ready to end at the time of this recording, but wow, what a ride it has been. This run has slowly been released in trade paperback format. We've also had some of these oversized hardcovers that collect about 10 issues a pop. And they even announced recently that a Volume 1 omnibus for this Chip Zdarsky Daredevil run has been solicited to come out in 2024. I really love this run. I know I'm still making my way through it as I'm recording this, but everything I've read so far, and I've read the first 30 issues or so, it has just been so much fun. The art we've gotten throughout most of this run has been absolutely fantastic, kind of realistic looking, just so vibrant and alive, and I think that the darkness and just the personal character turmoil we get Matt Murdock wading through is a real good return to form for this book. I really think that it's another great example of setting up a new status quo for our hero, which really, again, I think makes it so great for new readers. I also wanted to include this because it's really still an ongoing title, even though it's about to end. If you're a new reader who wants to jump on the Daredevil train, this run is still actively being discussed all the time because it's still going. And I think that that's also fun for new people that are jumping onto a character or comics in general, to really jump onto comic books that are still within the discussion online, in person, things like that. They're in the zeitgeist of comic book culture, so I had to recommend it for new readers who want to get aboard something that's still so active. I really love this series. I think that we get to see Matt juggle with a lot of things he's never really dealt with before, or certainly at least dealing with things in brand new ways. I really just love what Zdarsky's done with this character and just with these story arcs overall. He really has a deep appreciation for the characters and the central supporting cast, and you can see it in so many of his pages. I absolutely love this book. It's back to kind of gritty crime Daredevil. We have some great superheroic action sequences and some of the best Daredevil art I have ever had the pleasure of reading I've found in this Chip Zdarsky era. What a fantastic book, and a high recommend. And that's really going to wrap up our list of 10 great Daredevil comics for new readers. I hope you enjoyed this video. I would love to get your feedback in the comments below. I would also love, if you're a longtime Daredevil fan, definitely comment some of your favorite recommendations for new readers as well. I know there's so many recommendations I could have given. A couple honorable mentions to Ed Brubaker's run and the Senti's run from what I've read. A lot of great stuff out there. There's even more, I'm sure. But let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know if you're a Daredevil fan and what you're looking forward to in the world of Daredevil. I again really appreciate all of you watching and taking your time to just be a part of this community. It really makes it so worthwhile. Again, if you haven't yet, please consider subscribing to the channel if you've yet to do so. Like this video again, maybe share it with some friends. And until next time, this has been the Comic Book Report. Thank you so much. Maybe check out one of these other videos and have a good one.